Welcome to another episode of GQ Speaks, your go-to platform for insightful conversations, captivating stories, and thought-provoking discussions. GQ is a series of experiences, and we're just making sense of that as we go along. That is what we're doing here, one conversation at a time. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into our episode.
This is the story about a campus that teaches you how to interrogate power, until maybe the interrogation turns inward. The protest sounds you're hearing, it's a student activism rally from Georgetown's main campus in Washington, D.C. Its branch campus, the School of Foreign Service in Doha, Qatar, might have anticipated something similar earlier this September. Or at least that's what some of the theatrics led us to believe. It didn't happen though. Not exactly. Instead, what students chose was something a bit more complicated. Public critique without a boycott. Pushback without a walkout. And a meeting in a place designed for disagreement. The Red Square. Essentially, we're trying to understand, what does it mean where your university pursues projects you fundamentally question? Can your dissent be heard without censorship? This episode is about what happens when student activism collides with university administration. When the very people an institution is meant to serve begin to question whether that institution is truly serving them at all. We start with three voices, three angles on pretty much the same issue at hand. Why were you adamant on having a Hiwaraat for Sudan, and how did that manifest?
It said politics through art, but it was not actually politics through art. After attending the conference, I can tell you, it was mostly art. The war was sprinkled here and there, but it was not addressed in any substantial way.
The entire mission of the university, of an liberal arts program like ours, is to encourage critical thinking, debate. You should be uncomfortable. So I've been uncomfortable so many times along the way in my education.
It's important for us to engage our community, and by our community I mean everyone within the institution. That is what we teach, and that is what we should be doing as well. If we are creating spaces for dialogue within the Hiwaraat conference, it should be a dialogue and a space that accommodates everybody. And I'm saying this to say that neither extremes should not be the case. It should be a space where everybody is equally represented, every voice is equally heard, and everyone is included in the conversation. So I would say that the thing I like about the Hiwaraat, and I think we can even do more of that, is that it's a space where diverse groups of people can come in and speak.
So that's pretty much the triangle: frustration, mission, inclusion. And caught in the crossfire is GQ's premier conference series known as Hiwaraat. But before we address the elephant in the room, to understand how this triangle came into existence, we had to trace back to the stage where things actually started unfolding. So in Georgetown's main campus in Washington, D.C., there's a brick plaza known as the Red Square. It's red. And during my exchange semester, I actually walked through it every now and then going to my classes, and it was never empty, except maybe when it rained or snowed. But essentially, it served as a gathering place, a site of protest, and a space where students have historically made their voices heard. Students in Qatar naturally wanted something similar. So in 2019, some 15 years after GQ first opened, and under then student government president Malak Elmoh, Red Square finally came into existence in Doha, Qatar. But today's story is not about the Red Square, it's about Hiwaraat. So I want us to fast forward 2025, 6 years later, where GQ students utilized this very avenue to express their dissatisfaction over the Hiwaraat conference titled Seeing Sudan Politics Through Art. So What exactly unfolded in their meeting when they came together in the Red Square? I personally was not there, but luckily I got witnesses who spoke out and wanted to remain anonymous. This meeting was led by 2 students, Noon and Aya, and backed by several associations on campus and clubs such as the Student Government Association, Student Justice for Palestine, Muslim Student Association, African Student Association, Black Student Association, and many more. And they wanted to have a raw discussion. Noon and Aya were essentially part of the organizing team of this Hiwaraat conference, but their critiques of the theme and the guests and the program were not taken into account. They decided to come together in the Red Square and talk to the GQ community to try to understand how they can engage with the conference despite its shortcomings. Faculty, staff, students showed up to show their support. And then, unexpectedly, somebody appears at the door. It's the dean of the university, Dean Safwan Masri, and he came in with a conversation about trust. As the door was sliding open, witnesses described the air as filled with tension. There were rumors going around about a protest, potentially a boycott from students towards the conference. Witnesses described the looks on people's faces. People were unhappy. And there was a laptop in the middle of the room where a professor was joining via Zoom. Let's hear from her what unfolded during the meeting.
Yeah, I found it to be a very matured way of handling whatever concern that they had. They organized this meeting themselves. They invited professors and staff to join, and they opened the floor for everybody to share their opinions on how they think it was best to handle the situation. And that is what we were there to do. And I think it ended up being a very worthwhile conversation because everybody recognized that it was an important conference to have. It was the first on Sudan. So the best, way to go about it was to ensure that everybody attends the conference and gives their voice as much as possible.
Before we go any further, this is overdue. We need to understand what Hiwaraat essentially is. So back in my fall semester of my sophomore year in 2023, I remember the word Hiwaraat being everywhere, on social media, on my emails, on posters in university. Everybody was talking about it. It was essentially a conference series, as I came to understand it, that covered various topics and tried to make a public dialogue out of academic discussions. But I wanted to go on the official website of the university to understand exactly how they frame Hiwaraat to be. It reads that the Hiwaraat conference series offers timely and topical conferences that draw together experts, practitioners, scholars, policymakers, and youth to discuss some of the most pressing topics of our time. The conferences have covered topics from Sudan to Afghanistan, Palestine to Iraq, discussed transgender, Islamophobia. During the conference of Sudan, as a student, I wanted to show up for the conference and essentially learn more about Sudan's politics. I walked up to Professor Magdalena Rostron during the conference, and she explained to me what Hiwaraat really meant for her.
We are here, in the middle of just about everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we become well informed and we interact with people who bring academic expertise, professional expertise, but also experience, because we engage with practitioners. These many fields that have been discussed, Iraq, Afghanistan, this conference on Sudan, on Palestine, so those are the people who tell us that it's all real. And I think as an educator, as a teacher, I have seen it in my classes that when I bring in people who have experienced certain things that we have only read about, the reception on the part of my students and the understanding is immediately deepened, enhanced, and enriched. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for all of us to become more informed and enriched.
enhanced and enriched through exposure. But what exposure are we talking about? And who gets to decide what exposure we get? That's probably where most of the student critique from back in Brett Square was originating from. This pushed me to dig deeper. I really wanted to understand who exactly is behind the Hiwaraat conference series. I got in touch with Professor Firat Uruj, who he himself has organized a bunch of Hiwaraat conferences as a faculty member, and he walked me through how a Hiwaraat conference essentially comes into existence.
There is a call to make proposals, and it's an open call to the entire faculty. And this call is made in both semesters. Obviously, there is a timeline. These things take a long time to organize. So, even for the upcoming Hiwaraat, we made this proposal in last spring's call. It is approved. There is some early preparation to take care of, and then you start working on it even more specifically. To answer your question, there is a call to the faculty. The Dean's Office has also organized some of the Hiwaraat in a more direct way. As you know, the Center for Regional and International Studies has also been quite active, precisely because that's the mandate of the center.
By the end of our conversation, I finally came to understand how Hiwaraat truly operated. So decisions regarding overall mission, purposes, themes, topics, and program directions are actually made through a consultative process, which involves faculty suggestions, proposal submissions, and the review by the dean himself and a designated committee. And apparently, at the heart of all of this was the Center of International and Regional Studies, and known as CIRS, which pioneered when it came to kickstarting Hiwaraat, starting with 3 conferences in its first year, and now takes on Hiwaraat conferences every now and then. So I reached out to CIRS to try to understand what their role exactly looked like when it came to Hiwaraat. Luckily, their executive director, Zahra Babar, agreed to sit down and speak about how the center approaches Hiwaraat as a project.
This incredible set of faculty. We have great intellectual content that's being produced. There are so many things happening on campus. You just go by the board or whatever, and you see there are like 20 events happening on campus. So with all this expertise here and all this energy here, how is it that the larger Qatar public doesn't seem to be engaging? It should be. How come the larger Qatar public isn't benefiting from this, from our presence? And the conversations were, well, we're an academic institution. We are always a bit inward. We're focused on our teaching and we're focused on our research. And faculty, academics are not always the best place to go out there and just generally speak. They're used to speaking in certain using certain frameworks. They're used to speaking to niche audiences. So that was one. And then there were lots of reasons why we weren't doing this in the same way. And I don't mean CIRS, I mean the university. But he really felt like this was something that was an onus upon us. People also said this Qatar Foundation bubble. Like, we do lots of things on campus. People don't come in. It's not our fault. We hold events all the time on campus that are open to the public. This one today is open to the public. Sure, we can bring in 20, 30 people. But the idea of masses of people coming to Qatar Foundation events, this is something I have friends out there who always think of this as a bit remote. It's a bit outside Qatar. It's not that, they don't see it as totally space open to everyone. I don't know why, but it persists. So these were the kind of discussions we were having, and that's when the dean was like, one was just our presence needed to be more out there in a meaningful way, engaging with the larger Qatari community. But undergirding that was also something which I also early on, I really believed in this vision of his, which is that we are all experiencing a pretty turbulent world. Perhaps in every age of humanity, people conceive of their age as being one that's particularly afflicted. But, we, at least the way we experience it, is there's so much happening. The Middle East in particular, but the Middle East is deeply connected to other parts of the world and deeply affected by what's happening in other parts of the world. So we shouldn't be shying away from being part of those conversations, of having something to say, drawing attention, using our experience, our networks, our faculty, the knowledge we are generating on this campus, using it to engage with some of these important global conversations, right? So that's where Hiwaraat is very specific. It's not just about your research and the originality of it. Like, I could be working on some really interesting original project, but it doesn't interest a larger audience, nor does it intersect with one of these bigger questions of what's going on out there. So that was where Hiwaraat was placed. It was local audience engagement with connection to GUQ, making GUQ's presence felt, but also GUQ leveraging its networks, its expertise, its faculty, its resources to connect to these larger global conversations. Mm-hmm. And so in that early stage, which was the fall of 2023, the Dean felt that CIRS was a good vehicle for getting some of this started. And partly that's because we have already had this role where we've been engaging in public affairs programming. We've done a lot of conferences with our research in the past. We have regular series, and it was just the ability to assemble it.
So that's how Hiwaraat really came to be. It's not really the work of one department, not even CIRS alone, but this sort of sprawling collaboration between faculty committees and the Dean's office. And here's the thing. Pulling off even one of these conferences is hard enough on its own. But doing multiple conferences back to back in the same academic year, that's kind of like a heavy lift. Because remember, CIRS isn't an events office, it's a research institute. They specialize in studying the region, producing papers, hosting roundtables, etc. And yet, here they are now running full-scale conferences trying to put dialogue and engagement at the center of everything they do. That pretty much takes their mission to a whole new level. She went on to speak about how this journey looked like.
So I think that first year was really quite a lot because we worked on 3, and 2 of those were tied to CIRS ongoing projects. One was on Afghanistan. We had a conference in November 2023, the second Hiwaraat, which was on Afghanistan's, what was happening in Afghanistan, but much more from a regional perspective. So looking specifically at the role of Afghanistan's neighbors, looking at the role of the Gulf states, looking at the role of Central Asian states in Afghanistan, as opposed to Afghanistan's always been looked at like from Europe and from the US. And this was part of a longer term project. We had worked on a research project that had begun earlier at CIRS with colleagues on main campus, a professor there, Professor Nuruddin, who's an expert on this topic, and another colleague who's at the University of Cambridge, who's on PAN. So CIRS had been working on a small, closed-door little project on this, and we had policy and research papers that came out. So we thought, why not take this? Because this is relevant. I mean, even if the world forgets about Afghanistan frequently, it is a critically important country for us to be thinking about. And so that for us seemed a natural fit into a Hiwaraat. We had the experts already, we had community, we had generated content. So turning that to a larger audience was an easy thing. That was one we did. The other one we did in December 2023 was also for us, it made sense in the context of CIRS. This was a project we'd been working on with professors Trish Kashle and Victoria Gugassian, which was a CIRS but faculty-led project, and many of our projects are. And it was on looking at the impact of energy on cultural and social life. And so they just had a second, the decolonizing energy was the second, that was not CIRS, that was them on their own. But the first conference on energy culture, which we did December 23, was also related to that project. So for CIRS, we all agree internally, and the Dean has been really supportive, that the best Hiwaraats we can do is when we're already working on a research project, which means we have already spent a year becoming well-versed on this topic. We've already got a group of scholars and experts who are integrated and working on this with CIRS. So we have some relevance. We have something we know we can contribute. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do that. That sounds interesting. And yet there's also an overlap between our project and like global interests. And that's how Sudan also happened. Sudan was part of a longer term project. We've been working on Sudan related projects for the past 2 years. And so again, Sudan was easy. So those three are all CIRS Hiwaraats, which were driven by our own internal research projects, working closely with members of our faculty, and which we translated to a broader audience, because you've got to change it a little to make it more digestible, right? The other two the other ones that we did were 3 or 2, however you put them, because the Palestine was broken into 2 sections, of Palestine in March of 24, and then Reimagine Palestine in September 24. Those were us working much more closely directly with the dean and a number of the faculty. Those were Hiwaraats where it was the dean and 2, 3 or 4 faculty members working very closely with them who had the vision for those, because we have not done a lot on Palestine. At the center, our research strengths, we have not really we've done many projects which have included Palestine, though we haven't done extensive, just Palestine-focused stuff. So the intellectual direction of that was guided by faculty and the dean, and we agreed, because I think we demonstrated that, like I said, we're good at organizing, and it's shocking how much goes into organizing this. You have to write to 70 people, you have to spend months dealing with invitations, it takes so long to craft an agenda. There's so much actual work that goes into it. You need a group of people who know how to do it. So those were the other 2 we worked on, and there's no doubt that the relevance of doing something on Palestine resonated with all of us, so we were really keen to do it. And the last Hiwaraat was the very first inaugural one, and that was the one that we did in September 2023, which was on Iraq. And that was really just to kickstart the series for this, because we wanted to do something that was relevant, and it was, because this was exactly 20 years on since the invasion of Iraq. The invasion of Iraq had taken place in the spring of that 20 years earlier. And we thought it would be an important occasion to mark and to use, not just as to think about Iraq, but to reflect on the broader region. And the consequences of war and what, those sort of lingering afterlives of the war in Iraq, both on Iraq, but also the rest of the Gulf. And so that one again, the Iraq one was like a consultation and discussion between the dean and 3 members of faculty and us. I would say the dean was very keen, and there were 3 faculty in particular, our Middle East Studies Politics faculty, who we worked with closely, but it was a CIRS-driven one. We had to learn a lot, but what helped was we have these really good networks with Middle East scholars of politics and conflict along. So that's broadly how our approach has been. And I think now that this Hiwaraat series is well and truly underway and on its own steam, we will never be in a position where we do 3 in 1 year again, because that really meant we could barely do any of our research. And now we have ample faculty interest in it. So several of, as you know, the Decolonizing Energy was our faculty. We had the AI, which was faculty. We had the gender, and we had the water. All of those, other Hiwaraats, water, were driven by proposals that our faculty submitted. I think it's an incredibly important series. I think it's highly effective, and what its mission and goals were, which were to make Georgetown's presence known in Qatar again, remind people that we're here.
I quickly understood that inside the university, disagreement can be productive. It's actually part of what academic life is supposed to be. But I think once a discussion moves into a public forum with cameras and headlines and a huge audience watching, things change. The audience is not just listening, they want answers, they want clarity, sometimes even fixes. And that tension doesn't just shape how Georgetown Qatar or CIRS approaches Hiwaraat. It shapes how people like Zahra experience their own work. The pressure to engage students, protect colleagues, and still deliver something the public finds meaningful. So going back to the original crisis in question, I decided to shoot my shot and ask her what she thought of student involvement in organizing Hiwaraat.
We've involved students in all of the CIRS Hiwaraat, and I think the other faculty have definitely involved students, their own research areas and all. Partly that's because we're gifted with amazing students who work for us, and we have some wonderful ones who have always been lucky. And so it's for them, we consider them, they're our colleagues. So we're pitching in and working hard, they have to work hard with us. But from the very early stages, when we launched this, we started this connect and converse. I don't know if you've ever participated, but it's a parallel session that we integrate into the conferences. And we've done this from the very early Hiwaraat conferences.
Is it like the majlis?
It's like a majlis. Basically, we figure that our students can have an opportunity to engage with people they normally would not get to in small, intimate settings. This was really early on we thought of this. And so while the conference is going on, in advance of it, we used to reach out, changes now, it's been a couple of years, we reach out to a group of students, we ask them to kind of poll them to see, well, these are the 40 speakers. Who are the 10, 15 you think students might like to speak with? And then these separate sessions of I think they're like half an hour, 45 minutes, are held in the hotel, but in a separate space. None of us are go in, the faculty, staff, and any administrators. We just make sure it happens, but then it's totally student-led. So it's a conversation between one of our speakers who's come in, and then there are a number of students who sign up to turn up. So we've always had them as, I would say, special consumers, right? In the sense that you have the students are there as an audience for all our stuff, but this is a very student-focused thing. It's quite incredible. You get like a world-renowned speaker, someone, and you get a chance to, with 10 other students, spend time with them. I don't know sometimes if my students understand how exceptional these kinds of experiences are. They say, I didn't have these opportunities when I was in university in the US. But anyway, so that was it. But then as we progressed each stage, we have great faith in our students and their capacities, and we also super recognize their enthusiasm, their critical engagement with things, a lot of them have deep knowledge of certain areas, and so we did want to integrate them more in a focused manner. And in the Sudan case, Susie, who was for us the intellectual lead on this project, was very keen from the beginning, saying, and we had confidence by then, which is like, when we first started the Hiwaraat, I don't know what it's like if you throw students up there in front of 600 people. It's not about whether they're good enough to pull it off. How will they feel? Are they going to be comfortable? These conversations are different than having them on the Georgetown campus. But I think it was also that confidence of knowing that we know how to run these things now, and our students, we will work with them closely. We will have an engagement with them because we want them to play a prominent role. We'd like them to be part of the conversation. We'd like them to be involved not just with identifying speakers, but to actually moderate conversations. So that was driven by us. I don't think any of the other Hiwaraats have done that.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, but it has, it might be challenging because unfortunately then we weren't able to meet all their expectations either. So, Georgetown students have the opportunities to host their own annual conferences. There's funding for this. I don't understand why that hasn't happened in the last few years.
Actually, I have no idea.
Well, yes, for my first 10 years, it was an annual student-run conference. It was known as the Georgetown University. You should speak to MK Harb about it.
Okay.
Really, ask him, because this was something they claimed they were going to relaunch. Because the difficult thing is, I want to always include students in that way. I want them to be critically involved. But it's like anything in life, sometimes you want to be part of something, but you don't agree with 100% of it.
Yeah.
Now, I work here. I'm paid to work here, as are my colleagues. So if I disagree with something, agree with something, it's irrelevant. I have to just do a good job with it. And I have to believe that there's a better reason why this is happening. Something which is maybe outside my own remit, I can at least appreciate why it's being done this way. But for students, that's harder, right? Students, as they should be, are passionate, emotional, struck in a very difficult world at the moment. And so if they have very strong feelings, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. And if they debated with us, with Susie in particular, and my other colleagues are not on this conference, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think it's a sign that we're doing something right at the university. But it does make it very difficult, because at the end of the day, if things become boycotted and it causes all kinds of turbulence in our community, the internal reaction sometimes is, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's not, and I don't mean don't want to work with our students anymore. I just mean I need to protect my colleagues and make sure that they feel rewarded for their intense amount of work that goes into this. I mean, we work so many weekends. And it's not to feel sorry for us. This is what you do when you really want to do something well. But when you do all of that, and then you're much more likely to find yourself criticized. You're not expecting praise, but the deep critique can just hurt, because you feel like, oh, I put so much time and effort and trying to be, But it is what it is, I mean, that is part of working life, and everyone moves on.
The Red Square meeting, organized earlier in September, wasn't really the first time Hiwaraat faced pushback from students. The pattern has repeated itself across multiple conferences, multiple topics. From its early days, starting with its first conference titled The Invasion of Iraq, Regional Reflections. Ameer Sadi is an Iraqi student at GQ from the class 2028. He spoke to us about his experience attending the Invasion of Iraq conference. Let's hear more from him.
Well, I think one thing I definitely noticed was there was a lot of discussion about, and I understand why, because the thing's called Regional Reflections, but I think the Iraq Hiwaraat was actually not very Iraq focused. I think there were a lot of panels on kind of the consequences for the region, for Turkey, Iran, the Gulf, and the Levant, and all these places. And even when there were kind of discussions about Iraq, I don't think it was very Iraqi centered. I mean, one example was they had also just so I can clarify, I obviously did not attend every single panel at the Iraq Hiwaraat. But for example, there was an youth activism panel with two people, one of whom was an Iraqi climate change activist. The other one was a GUQ student who's an Egyptian with no connection to Iraq, right? Other than whatever research he's done on Iraq. But for a panel on youth activism, I think it would probably be important to have gotten a youth activist or maybe an expert on youth activism in Iraq, and kind of center Iraqi voices here. I think one of the other issues I saw was one of the first names I spotted immediately while I was attending the conference was a woman named Rashid Aqaidi. She's a journalist in Mosul. She's Iraqi. And so one of the thing with her is she's actually a very controversial figure. Many people at that conference are, and this is kind of hard to explain why this is problematic, but many of these people at the conference are sympathizers with the old Iraqi monarchy. They say very strange things in defense of the monarchy. For context, the monarchy was overthrown in 1958. They were responsible for Iraq's expulsion of Jews, for its massacre of Assyrians, of Kurdish and Shi'i tribes. And so you can go back to their tweets, and even Rashid Aqaidi has a tweet that she made before the conference that was something along the lines of, people talk about British colonialism and classism and all that jazz, but the monarchy was still Iraq's golden age, and Faisal II was the cutest king to ever rule, and strange things like that. And so, obviously it rubs you the wrong way, because, I mean, it's not just about them having an opinion that I disagree with, right? And it's not even just about the fact that they have an opinion that whitewashes the crimes that happened under certain regimes in Iraq. But it's also the fact that they made up such a huge portion of the speakers there. Maybe 3 or 4 speakers I knew to be sympathizers of the monarchy. But that's not actually representative of the political opinions of lots of Iraqis. I'm sure they could have gotten experts from elsewhere who would have brought a more diverse range of opinions. But instead, you have kind of the same type of Iraqi academic popping up over and over again. And, it was kind of concerning, to say the least. I think that's probably the biggest pitfall of this, is it didn't really feel like this was a conference for Iraqis. And which is okay. I mean, if it wants to be a conference that helps bring awareness about Iraq to the world, then that's okay. But then the onus is on Georgetown to now make sure that they're accurately representing what Iraqi discourse looks like.
Similarly, Afghanistan was one of the earliest conversations of Hiwaraat back in fall 2023. The conference, titled Afghanistan Regional Symposium Confronting the Impasse, came with a lot of hope for students. Students were actively involved. They were organizing pre-conference events, collaborating with CIRS, and creating cultural showcases. But the 3-day conference left many people conflicted. Afghanistan went from being barely mentioned on campus to being the sole focus for 3 days, then disappearing again from the conversation. Farkhunda Fazeylar, an Afghan student from the class 2026, who was deeply involved with the Afghan club on campus, emphasized her disappointment.
Honestly, I didn't really know what it was. I think my perception of Hiwaraat was mostly formed because there was a discussion that was going to be on Afghanistan. I remember in the first round of like Hiwaraat conferences happening, Afghanistan was one of them. And so in my head, it was like, okay, this is good. You know, this is good that a conversation on Afghanistan is being started, especially at such a huge level where, you know, people are being invited from different parts of the world. You have speakers coming in, you have professionals coming in, you have policymakers coming in, and even students are invited to participate. So in that sense, I think that's kind of what my exposure was to Hiwaraat, and I honestly had like high hopes, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And when you say high hopes, how different was it in comparison to reality?
When I say high hopes, I mean in the sense that finally Afghanistan is being talked about, you know? I just did not know what to expect of the conference. And for me, I think I remember going into the conference and then coming out of the 3 days, and I was so overwhelmed. I was so overwhelmed with not only knowledge and information, but also emotions, because everyone's talking about Afghanistan, everyone's mentioning Afghanistan over those 3 days, and that's it. You know, nobody was talking about Afghanistan up until the Friday of the conference, and then you will hear Afghanistan all the time over the course of those 3 days, and then after that, it's done. You know, I think that made me feel really overwhelmed, and like I felt very weird about it, because it's like, okay, not weird, but it just I think it was an off-putting emotion for me as an Afghan, because at some point I was like, okay, this is great, like I'm hearing conversations about Afghanistan. There's like, we had one panel on climate change in Afghanistan, you know. This is something that people are experiencing on a daily basis, but nobody really talks about. And so I was like, this is so eye-opening. But you know, what after that? What exactly happened after that conference or that panel on climate change in Afghanistan? I think I don't necessarily see that in a lot of like our classes, whether that be our curriculum or any other kind of like on-campus involvement. And I think that changed my perception of Hiwaraat as a conference.
The concern? Nothing tangible or long-lasting emerged. No integration to curriculum, no follow-up talks. Essentially, no sustained dialogue.
It's like you're talking about people, you're talking about their experiences, and I am like one of those people. Like, I experienced these things that were being talked about in these conferences, like in the context of Afghanistan as well. And so in a sense, I think I had mixed emotions all the time. I was like, okay, I'm being talked about, but at the same time, like, it's good that they're talking about it. But then if nothing comes out of it, then it's kind of like, well, yes, that was performative. You know, like, what's the point of you talking about people's miseries and talking about the struggles that they face if there's not a tangible thing that comes out of it?
She wasn't the first to use this word, performative. This word has been a recurring theme across most of the student interviews we conducted. Farkhunda's writing pointing out, what's the point of talking about people's miseries and struggles if there's not a tangible thing that comes of it? Her sentence carries a lot of weight. In many ways, the Red Square meeting from earlier can be considered as a preemptive attempt at preventing such a pitfall from the Sudan conference. Its lead organizers, Aya Noon, had actually been contacted by CIRS back in 2024 to work on the Sudan conference. Despite being reached out by CIRS itself and being offered student employments, their opinions and concerns weren't really taken into account. Discontent with the theme of the program, it was only natural that they spoke out. Only this time, publicly in the Red Square. The floor, however, wasn't restricted to students. Even faculty members were invited to attend. Among them, Professor Iroulo Lynda joined via Zoom despite her circumstances.
The students reached out to me. What I know about the Red Square is that it's a space where students are, is a dedicated space for students to share their opinions, to be, comfortable to voice what their concerns about the institution is. So I wouldn't be at the Red Square because, technically I shouldn't be at the Red Square as a professor because that's not my space. So I was invited by students and I came. I found it to be a very matured way of handling whatever concern that they had, because they organized this meeting themselves. They invited professors and also staff to join, and they opened the floor for everybody to share their opinions on how they think it was best to handle the situation. And that is what we were there to do. And I think it ended up being a very worthwhile conversation because everybody recognized that it was an important conference to have. It was the first on Sudan. So the best, way to go about it was to ensure that everybody attends the conference and gives their voice as much as possible.
10 days later, in the aftermath of the Red Square meeting, Aya and Noon decided to draft a statement that was hung up in the Red Square on September 11th and posted on social media accounts, expressing their disapproval of the trajectory of the conference, yet urging students to engage critically. Various clubs and organizations on campus supported the statement: SJP, ASA, BSA, Muster Club, MSA, and even the Student Government Association. The statement reads, "Dear student body, troubled by the topic of the upcoming Hiwaraat conference at a time when our country faces famine, mass atrocities, and mass displacement, we believe that putting art at the center is unrealistic at best. We believe that if there were a 3-day conference focused solely on the political dimensions of the crisis, it would still fall short of fully addressing the tragedy unfolding on the ground in Sudan." But here's what's crucial. The statement concluded by urging students to do 2 things: read and learn about the war in Sudan ahead of the conference, and attend the conference critically, ask questions, and engage with the difficulty. I'm looking at the statement closely. There is no call for a boycott. There is no call for a protest. So where did these rumors really come from? The clubs that supported the statement were numerous. Throughout the following days, messages were sent across group chats to all batches, urging students not to boycott the conference, but instead to engage with it, ask questions, and attend. The clarification was repeated again and again. Boycotting is essentially the same as turning a blind eye. Instead, students should critique, learn, and engage. As the weekend of the conference was approaching on September 18th, I went around asking students how they felt. Not a single student was pro-boycott, not even during the conference itself. Students seem to acknowledge this complexity, that critique does not equal rejection.
We did get a lot of supports from people within GQ, but I think we faced a lot of consequences just for stating our opinion, just for being students who disagree with something. And the ironic part in this is that when we were in that meeting in the Red Square, we talked about how we would not like people to boycott the conference because we view it as being lazy. We view it as turning a blind eye to Sudan. We think people should educate themselves and then come to the conference and engage with the speakers critically, or even just inject the word war into the conference within the questions that are being submitted in the QR code. And we also talked about how we want to wear pins, and we were gonna deal with it very maturely. We didn't want to disrupt. We just wanted to make sure that people within the conference understood that this is not what we wanted, and that this should have been a platform to talk about Sudan's war.
But it really wasn't enough to just get student voices. I wanted to hear the other side. How did the faculty and staff see this tension unfold? And what was their understanding of what it meant for students to push back against administration? There was a comment that was made under one of our reels, made by Professor Gerd Noneman, who was an international politics professor at Georgetown. In his own words, Professor Noneman actually applauded the conference. He says, "A major public event like this, bringing together lots of Sudanese artists, journalists, activists, students, and analysts with the wider community, generates new ideas and networks and reminds the world and even ourselves that Sudan is not just an abstract conflict, something the world all too easily can park as intractable and far away. But rather, it shows us that it's a rich society with history, culture, and vibrant human beings. In other words, it demolishes the walls of distance. I would say that can only be a good thing. Very much needed." Were the faculty being too generous, or were the students being too critical? Even if we try to put the past behind us, there is more Hiwaraat conferences coming. So the question remains is, what can Hiwaraat moving forward look like? A Palestinian student wanted to share her sentiment while remaining anonymous.
But I wish that the students were working on the conference and at least have a student voice, because it seems like no matter every conference, the student body is always disappointed and is highly critical. I think students, because we bring in a younger, fresher perspective and we learn and feel things differently than the team of Hiwaraat, because I feel the team of Hiwaraat is just doing conferences just to make a conference, not to actually raise awareness and to educate the students. These conferences are for Georgetown. So why is there no change? Why can't the administration of the Hiwaraat hierarchy change and to include the student voices? Because by then, the conferences can be much better if the students are working on it, whether it's by crafting the layout, choosing the format, bringing the speakers, finding the different topics and themes, as conferences are for the students to learn and for the public to learn. So why can't you bring the student perspective as well to make your conference even better if your target is the Georgetown community and the main Georgetown community are students?
But not everybody shared these same critiques. Some actually saw that students were involved since the beginning in Hiwaraat conferences, and they played an active role in shaping them. Professor Roots touches on this during our conversation.
With all due respect to our students, I want to correct that a bit, at least to my best knowledge, in both the ones I was involved in organizing, but also in quite a number of them, there was some form of student involvement. We can, of course, discuss whether this is enough or not. But with Iraq, and perhaps, the student body is a big one, and each time there is like maybe, a limited number that who are more directly involved. So I understand that, but with Iraq, I know the students had produced kind of a conference focused artwork, a ceramic panel that it gave them a certain perhaps artistic platform to think about the 20 years of Iraq's invasion. It's something, a similar modality and also in the form of cultural presentations. I remember it to have taken place in Afghanistan as well. With our global histories and practices of Islamophobia, we actually had a dedicated panel on tackling Islamophobia on college campuses, and our students were involved in that. During the Global Energy Cultures, we had a dedicated youth panel, which was completely student panelists, but I do recognize, I think I hear, right, that the students have been expressing more interest and more, they made more calls for being more directly involved. And that's something that, down the road we should certainly work more toward. I think I can talk with some certainty about that. I know it may not be adequate enough. That's the struggle. As I said, the value of Hiwaraat is really inviting everyone into the conversation, to the assembly, so to speak, over limited time and space and so on. There is always, a set of compromises in the decision process, right? We cannot bring everyone we want, for instance, from outside. Sometimes, from the local community or government sector, we want to bring quite relevant individuals for various reasons that may not happen. There is a certain inevitable compromise, but in terms of really breaking away from the traditional conference format, Hiwaraat did a globally exceptional job. I don't want to sound too praising, but that's indeed the case.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it is important to appreciate that openness, and for the students to know that there is a space for them, and perhaps they need to articulate how they want to be part of it. Indeed, in a more conversational, in a kind of dialogue way.
There was a positive outcome of the Red Square meeting that happened earlier in September. Noon and Aya, the Sudanese students who were working on a conference for Sudan, were given an extra panel by the dean himself. They were given the freedom to choose their speakers, the topic, and they were also given a live Q&A, like they requested, which basically allows people to ask questions in the moment without filtration through a QR code, which is the tradition of Hiwaraat. The panel they were given by the dean was titled Witnessing Sudan, while the panel they were given by CIRS was titled Reporting Sudan. Noon talks about the difference between them.
It did lead to us being given this panel. The funny thing about these two panels is that Witnessing Sudan, in my opinion, turned out to be better than our panel that we spent so much time on. Maybe the reason is that we had more freedom to choose speakers in that one. This freedom is still impacted by, obviously, the time restraint we had. So we were doing this within 1 week and a half, and we had way less time to figure out what the themes were going to be or what the questions were going to be.
But why did it have to reach that point? Why was this panel and this freedom given only after the Red Square meeting? We hear from John Burog, who's a regular attendee of Hiwaraat and a GQ alumnus himself.
And people would say that when we invite students on, they don't really know much about the world. But on the contrary, I think we need a type of debate or a type of conversation that relies on storytelling that I know students could excel at. Which is not to say this is like anecdotal evidence that you could just dismiss, but on the contrary, this is a form of discussion that humanizes what the war in Sudan is, right? What the war in Iraq is, what's occurring in Palestine. And I would really like to see that. I would really like to see, like, if they do a Hiwaraat conference on any country or any region, they would encourage students here at Georgetown University and perhaps beyond to tell their stories, not just like beyond like the statistics or the research that they see, but from their own experiences. And I think that would make it much more meaningful.
Here we are. Students are being critical, the faculty are exhausted, the administration feels the weight of the critique. The questions are not simple. When does criticism become resentment? And is there such a thing as student entitlement, or is this simply students taking the lessons they've been taught and applying them to their very own institution? Ftaim Al-Qahtani, who's from the class of 2026, speaks about this irony.
Because
at the end of the day, when you wake up at 8 a.m. for 4 years in a row, you know, being taught the same things, studying the same things, or even being exposed to the same things just because of our location. We're in the Middle East, so obviously we're going to have more awareness of issues that are happening to our neighboring countries or in very big communities in Qatar, for example. But the problem with this is that we get taught things in class, like, I don't know, speak up when you see something that is not right, or I don't know, be diplomatic, release statements. But then when student bodies actually do that, they face a lot of criticism. It poses a lot of risks on them. Like, let's assume these students have positions in Georgetown. Let's say they are student workers, for example. That poses so many risks on those students, even though they are literally just applying what they got taught in class, you know? So I just find that, how do I say it? It's a bit hypocritical, in the sense that we sit and we advocate for the right things over and again, but when these things happen within our own campus, it often feels like we're not allowed to criticize. Not even criticize, just talk about it. Yeah, so that was what I wanted to sort of touch up on. We're a School of Foreign Service, you know? We study these things, and how are they
we have a saturation.
Yeah, we're very saturated with these issues. So the reaction from the campus was very expected. And honestly, to me, I found it very ironic that they did not expect this, you know, did not expect people to speak out. Come on, you teach us these things in class and then we're not allowed to use them outside of class. It's just ironic.
Maybe the answer is not in choosing sides. Maybe it's in recognizing that a School of Foreign Service that teaches students to question power structures should not be surprised when those students turn that critical lens inwards. Maybe the discomfort, the tension, the messy dialogue, maybe that's exactly what a liberal arts education is supposed to feel like. The question remains, are we willing to sit in that discomfort together? As I was wrapping up my conversation with Professor Firat Uruj, I wanted to address the elephant in the room.
I think I want to address the elephant in the room, which is my last question. So how can Hiwaraat develop moving forward? What is it can Hiwaraat do differently?
We talked about the decision process and so on. I think we can now move forward to thinking about our further Hiwaraat sessions and plans by kind of bringing the entire Georgetown community, faculty, students, staff, administrators. I would like to use the term assembly or town hall, generate ideas. That way, you know, even in the decision process, there is a Hiwaraat, but there could be indeed a more community process beyond not only the faculty, not only the center, and so on and so forth. One way of how do we decide?
By the end of our conversation, Professor Uruj concludes with an interesting proposal. That students take the floor, they become the organizers, and they lead it from A to Z.
How about a student Hiwaraat, completely organized by the students and by complete student participation from the region, even I would say internationally. Of course, then they will have a taste of how difficult it is. I don't think this is a too fanciful idea, because MUN is one that we have been doing, but in other universities as well, conferences that are organized by students.
Maybe this is a wake-up call for everyone to realize that everybody deserves a space at the table, and that there is no right approach to conference organizing or leading an event. There's a discussion and there is dialogue. There is Hiwaraat.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of GQ Speaks. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspirations from our conversation today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow us on our Instagram page at GQ_speaks, and be sure to leave a review on Spotify to show your support.